Okay, so it's continuing in Torah Samach Aleph of Likutei Moharan. We were talking last time about Rabbi Nachman says that when a person doesn't have emunas chachamim, or they have a flaw in their emunas chachamim, they have what he calls mosaros. They have excesses of self. They have this sense where their basar, their flesh, their being is almost in a sense too much. And that leads to all sorts of crookedness in the way that they think, and it leads to confusion in their mind. And he describes this as midah keneged midah, that it's a natural result, the way we explained it last time. That midah keneged midah means that the punishment, so to speak, for something is not really to be looked at as a punishment. Rather, it's midah keneged midah. It's the natural consequence. It's what happens when you do something. If you jump, you're in the air. Right? So, midah keneged midah, when you jump, you're in the air. So, what does it mean that when a person doesn't have emunas chachamim, that this leads to mosaros? This leads to excess of self, or excess of aspects of self, where a person becomes crooked, either to the right or to the left. They don't have that anchoring in the center. So we described it last week in one way, and I wanted to just add another possible explanation to this, which is that why does a person lack belief in chachamim? Why does a person have a pagam in emunas chachamim, that they don't listen carefully enough and seriously enough to what those who are wiser than them say? I think the explanation for this is that the reason that a person doesn't give enough credence and significance to chachamim is really when a person is giving too much significance to their own das, to their own mind, to their own thinking. So I don't want to pay so much attention or to trust so much what those who are wiser than me are saying, because I don't want to really recognize that there is someone wiser than myself. I really want to focus more on what I think and what makes sense to me. And I'm limited in a sense to my reasoning, but I don't see it as my being limited. I see that as my reasoning, my way of understanding. That's the most significant thing. And so the lack of emunas chachamim really comes from the excess of self. I trust myself so much that I don't trust chachamim. And maybe that's what Rabbi Nachman is saying, that it's midah keneged midah, that there's an excess of self, because that's the whole point. Why do I not have emunas chachamim? Because I have too much emunas atzmi. I have too much belief in myself in a way. Of course, that phrase can be used in a very positive way, to believe in myself. But in this context, I put too much stock in my own thinking. So I've invested too much of my capital of belief in my own stock, and not enough in that of the chachamim. So now what ends up happening, midah keneged midah, the natural result of putting too much into myself is that therefore there's too much of myself. I haven't given up of myself to allow myself to be part of this broader context that is the wisdom of chachamim. Instead, now I'm limited to my own wisdom, which might be there, but it's limited compared to the broader wisdom that exists in the world of the chachamim. And so now I have an excess of self, because that's what it means to have a pagam in emunas chachamim. So maybe that's another aspect of what Rabbi Nachman means. So I want to continue and go weiter now. So Rabbi Nachman, and we're in Samach Aleph, and here now in Os Beis, Rabbi Nachman writes like this: V'yesh manhigim shenekram b'shem Rebbe. There are those leaders who are called by the name Rebbe. Shelimudam me'elu hamosaros. They are drawing their knowledge, their learning, from these excesses, meaning they drift too much to one side or to the other side. They're not anchored in the center pillar, the amud de'emtza. V'lo dai she'enam yecholem afilu lahanhig es atzman kanal. And it's not only that they don't know how to guide themselves, they don't know how to conduct their own lives. So all the more so they don't know how to guide others. They don't know how to guide themselves, so all the more so they don't know how to guide anybody else, even though they're in positions of being guides. They take this greatness for themselves to be someone who is a leader in the world. We have to look to not rely and not lean on those types of people. To not give them too much strength. To not call them by the name Rebbe. They themselves are not even so liable for their shortcomings. They have a tremendous yetzer hara to be a leader. There is, Rabbi Nachman seems to be saying in this line, there is a yetzer hara of leadership. It's not their fault. They have a tremendous yetzer hara. It's really a beautiful thing Rabbi Nachman saying. He's criticizing a certain way of being, but he's very quickly saying, but I'm not actually criticizing the person. I'm just letting you know that this phenomenon that exists is an issue. But I'm not blaming the person who's doing it, because I understand that if they are falling prey to this issue, that means that there must be some tremendous yetzer hara that's taking them over. But we need to be careful. We need to know of it. So he's almost separating the person from the action. Almost in a brisker sense, he's separating the gavra from the maisa, or the gavra from the chefza. The gavra, he's saying, we're not looking at negatively, we're understanding that the gavra is doing this because they must have some tremendous yetzer hara. But we do have to be real and acknowledge for ourselves that this maisa, or this chefza, this way of leadership is very problematic. That the advice that this person's giving is very problematic. We separate that from the person, but we have to know that advice is very problematic. We have to be very careful not to give them too much power. Those who are giving these types of leaders a lot of power, and they're leaning on them, they're giving them the name Rebbe. So it's actually really interesting. What Rabbi Nachman is saying is, it sounds like that these people who are called Rebbe, they're not the ones who are even asur litain din v'cheshbon. It's those who are giving those people significance. It's not the people, the leaders themselves. It's the enablers of those leaders. Those are the people who are asur litain din v'cheshbon. There's a lot of different important things that are in this paragraph. Rabbi Nachman is giving in this Torah and in many other places, he's giving a tremendous amount of significance to Chachamim, to Amunas Chachamim, which, as we've explained, is not a chiddush of Rabbi Nachman. There's Gemaras, and this is our Masor, this is in so many places. But Rabbi Nachman is emphasizing it a lot. But at the same time as giving tremendous significance to the Chachamim, Rabbi Nachman is beginning to distinguish between true Chachamim and Manhigim, who might be called Rebbe, but they're not actually people who deserve Emunas Chachamim. So it's hard to know exactly what to do with this. We have to keep learning what he says, but on the one hand, he's telling us to have tremendous Emunas Chachamim, and yet at the exact same time, he's telling us that not every Chacham is actually a Chacham. You can have somebody who's in a position of being called Rebbe, but they're not really a Rebbe. And there's a very real yetzer hara he's teaching us. There's a very real yetzer hara of being a manhig. Va'al yidei zeh, so continuing. Shemas michin Rebbe sheno hagin. Those who give significance to a Rebbe who's not really hagun to be a Rebbe, not actually fit or proper for such a position. Al yidei zeh nechlash ksav yadenu. This diminishes or weakens our writing, ksav yadenu, our handwriting. Ve'ein lo shum tokef, it doesn't have any strength anymore. V'nosten kach b'ksav yadam, and it gives strength to the ksav yad, to the writing of the other side of the world. And then they can make zeras that takes away the significance of our writing. And give significance only to their writing. And now the Jewish people will be forced to learn their ksav. And then that's also going to cause the Jewish people to be sent away from civilized dwelling places. To live in places that no Jew has lived before, that have not been settled. So we have to understand what this means, this inyan of handwriting, of the writing. But first, on a basic level, Rabbi Nachman is saying here, I think, that because we are giving so much significance to leadership, so much significance to Chachamim, it becomes all the more important to be discerning about who's actually a Chacham, who's actually roi for such status and such significance. You see, if we don't give all that much significance to a rebbe, so then, okay, there's a good rebbe, there's not a good rebbe, who really cares? We don't give so much significance to it. But if we're giving so much significance, then we need to be incredibly discerning. Because the moment you have someone in a position of being a rebbe who does something that casts doubt and negative light on what it means to be, on whether or not the Chachamim are truly Chachamim, on whether or not they are worthy of so much trust and so much significance. So now you've undermined the whole enterprise for everyone else as well. So the person that we are, the people, the group that we're giving such significance to, has to be a group that's actually truly fit for such status. And Rabbi Nachman is really creating the space to recognize that it's not always the case. And what happens when it's not the case? So our writing, our stature, loses its potency, loses its power. And by nature then, people are looking for there to be an authority, a power, something higher than themselves to give significance to. People are looking for an authority. So what happens if our leaders, if our authorities don't carry themselves and present themselves and act in ways that look worthy of our trust? We're going to place our trust elsewhere. I think that's what it means when he says that when our writing is weakened, naturally it now shifts over to the writing of the other side being strengthened. What does that mean? So it could be some ruchni mechanism that functions in that way. But I think on a very simple level, people are looking to give trust and give significance to something. It's like somebody who grows up. The natural state of a child is to want to give significance, to want to place their trust in something. Almost in a sense, to want to worship something. So if those who are in a position to be trusted act in ways that create that bond and that trust, so then the child will place their trust in them. But what if the parents, what if the people in that position, the rebbeim, whoever it is, they don't act in such a way? So the child is now still looking for who to trust, looking for who to worship, who to look up to, who to give authority to. So if they don't find it in those individuals, they're going to place it somewhere else. So they might end up placing it in a bottle of alcohol. They might end up placing it in the internet, in different behaviors and activities. They might end up placing it in other people. And now the strength of the other side is strengthened. So Nachman is saying that when the rebbeim who are einam hagunim, that are not actually fit, are given the significance, but then because they're not actually fit for it, the individual who gave them his trust and his significance and his respect now needs to place it elsewhere. He's going to place it on the other side. And now the other side will be strengthened and the side of Kedusha will be weakened. And the question is, why does Rabbi Nachman refer to this specifically as ksav yad? Why is this being referred to as the handwriting? Like, what does that mean? And then that also leads to being pushed out of makom hayishuv, of dwelling places, of places that we live. So Rabbi Nachman now continues to begin to explain that. We'll learn just another minute or two. Ki hasmicha shesomchen es harav v'haksav. The smicha that we give to a rebbe, right? We call it smicha, that we lean on them. We give them our trust. It's like a trust fall. The chachamim are like a trust fall. So we want to make sure they actually catch us, right? So the smicha that we give to a rav, the haksav, and the writing, him bechina achas. It's one bechina, one aspect, one shared characteristic. Ki hasmicha biyadayim, because we lean with our hands. Moshe kasav Yeshuvin and Malay Ruach Chachma Kisanach Moshe's Yadav Alav, that Moshe leaned his hands on Yeshua. V'hu b'chinas haksav, and that's also writing. B'chinas Yad Kosev, the hand writes. Okay, so we see he's saying that there's some connection between smicha and writing because they both involve the hands. So we have to still see what this means and how to understand this. Hashem should help us to be able to be discerning, to find the rebbe that is hagun, so that when we lean, we trust fall into that rebbe, we can actually feel that we are caught by something that is anchoring, someone that is anchoring, and someone that can actually truly catch us and hold us up and point us in the right direction, the amudah dem seisa. Shkach.